Good morning, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us for today's board chair check-in and update meeting. My name is Wilmarie Newton, and I will be your moderator today. In order to avoid background noise, I ask that you please mute yourself if you're not speaking. However, you can unmute yourself if you would like to ask a question, or you can type it into the chat box. If you have a webcam, we do welcome you to turn it on so we can make this more interactive. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under Services. And now I'd like to introduce Patrice McCarthy.
Thanks so much, Will Marie. And for those of you that don't know Will Marie, because I see we have a number of new board chairs joining us, which is terrific. Will Marie became our producer of all things virtual during the COVID years and has really been a key asset for us to be able to continue to have these virtual experiences. We started the board chair check-in during COVID, and we were doing it every week because, as you may recall, things were changing very rapidly. And once we went back to full-time in person in our schools, board chairs said this was really valuable and the chance to network with each other in the virtual environment, in addition to the board chair listserv that's available to you. They found that really valuable. And so we said, well, let's continue it once a month. We did have this conversation at the recent CABE CAPS convention about what's the best time of day to make this available. And so expect to receive a survey by email next week. It'll go to all board chairs, and we'll try and assess what's the sweet spot that most board members, most board chairs who want to participate in this activity would be able to take advantage of it. We know for some of you, it's in the middle of a workday. We know that late afternoon often involves picking up children from sports or school. We know that board committees often start meeting late in the day. So it's tough to find that sweet spot, but we're going to try and do that. I also want to remind you that we do have a board chair mentor program. And Nick, I see that you're on. Would you like to just say a little bit about that and how people could get involved?
Sure. We've been providing a mentor for new board chair. Well, any board chair that asked for it. We had one board chair who's been a chair for about a dozen years, and she asked for a mentor. I think she probably gave as much advice as she asked for. But we have a group of seasoned veterans who volunteer as mentors. We provide that service to you. I would just say if you reach out to me through my email, ncaruso@cabe.org, I'm getting ready. In fact, I see about 5 or 6 of you on the call today that I don't see listed as a chair in our database. So I'm waiting for us to make sure that our database aligns with the current roster of chairs. I'm taking notes from the names I don't recognize, and I'm marking it so we can go back and fix that. But sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to reach out to all of you, and if you're interested, just email me, and I'd be happy to, when we get a little closer, we'll match you to a mentor, introduce you electronically, and it's been a great asset. We've had a lot of really great responses from it. And I would also say that we have the board chair listserv where you can share with each other your ideas, your thoughts, and your questions. And I will also, as we are notified that you are the new chair, we'll put you on that list as well. So you'll also get those emails.
Thanks, Nick. And that's the reason we've waited to send out the survey about timing, because we know that in some communities, such as my own, it was only in the past week that the board leadership was elected for the upcoming year. So welcome to those of you that are new. Lisa, I'm going to ask you if you'd let them know what to expect in terms of an email about liaisons.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Patrice, and Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to see you all. We are going to be sending out an email later today. It's going to come from Nancy Prophy to board chairs asking for you to fill out a quick form identifying someone from your Board of Education to serve as a CABE liaison. Of course, this can be you if you so desire. But this person would be responsible for reporting out what's going on at CABE, and we do provide a monthly newsletter for that to CABE liaisons, as well as reporting back to us anything that they feel that we ought to know. that sort of thing. But certainly there are more details in that email. And should you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. But we really look forward to better engaging, quite frankly, with your boards in a two-way conversation, two-way communication.
Thanks, Lisa. And just so everyone knows, the format for these monthly Zooms is very informal. We do often try to provide an update on one or more critical issues from the staff. You'll see that on a regular basis, our entire senior staff does join these Zooms. And we are here as a resource, but we also learn a great deal from your discussion. So in addition to providing you some information from us, we also use this as a forum for you to share with each other. So if you're having a challenge that maybe you don't want to necessarily post on the listserv, but want to get some feedback from your peers. If you've got something new and exciting, Seth in the fall shared about the opening of a new school in his district. And so good news is always welcome because there's not enough of that, and we need to share the good news that we have. So know that this is your meeting and take advantage of that. Now, we have been around the state. Sheila and I have been to 6 legislative breakfasts in the past 8 days, and we have seen many of you there. So thank you very much for those of you that served as host communities for those breakfasts. Though we've had very good discussions with board members, superintendents, and legislators. We find that there is a great deal of similarity in terms of concerns, issues from Westport to Brooklyn, where we were this morning, concerns about electric buses, concerns continuing about special ed costs and reimbursement. And I'm going to turn it over to Sheila and have her talk to you a little bit about how best to prepare for the upcoming legislative session. I did see a question in the chat, and maybe Lisa, you can answer that. Jen asked whether the recordings are restricted to chairs or can any CABE member access them? And I frankly don't know the answer to that.
I don't either. I'm going to need to ask Will Marie, who just unmuted herself, since she posts them on the website. She'd have a good idea.
Well, Marie, what say you?
Kicking it down the road.
1 second. So I don't believe that they are password protected. No, they are not. So they can be accessed by anyone.
How do we feel about that?
Yeah, if people have thoughts about that, I'm sure with Will Marie's expertise, she could make them password protected for the board chairs. So think about that and either share your feedback in this discussion or send us an email.
I think also, and that may be wrong, but our CABE board has access to this
Yes.
conversation as well, in terms of could be here right now. So know that if you are representing a town that has somebody on our board, it's you plus that person that could be a part of this.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. So folks, thank you for being here. I would say to you, the best way to get ready for the legislative session is to, if you don't have a relationship with your legislators, get one. Have them come to your board meeting, meet them for a coffee, whatever it is to establish that relationship. Better to have that relationship before you need that relationship. You may be asking for school construction. You might be asking for, any type of change for your particular community. If you're an urban community, you have more concerns. Certainly small communities have concerns as well, but we typically know that the urban communities are out there asking. So please, if you need help establishing those relationships, we're happy to make that happen. But we know they're best done at the local level. If you do have a particularly strong relationship with your legislator, please let us know, because we will, through you or through them, however you want to work it, use and abuse that if we can. I don't mean, pester, but if you have a pretty good relationship, we'd want to know that because that can be useful to us and in turn be useful to you. In terms of not taking up too much of your time, you should receive in the next few days CABE's legislative priorities. There are 4. I'm not going to go into them today, but that's what we've been talking about at these breakfasts. You shouldn't be surprised by any of these. And know that we are working to set up some movement on these in terms of with other entities, other education entities and the like. I guess I'll say a couple more sentences, and then if you have questions. The legislative process will be quick this year. Legislative session opens on February 4th, and it ends the first Wednesday after the first Monday in May. So it's, I think, 12 weeks, or maybe, I don't know, I'll say it's 12 weeks. And it just does run quickly. When the Education Committee does set out bills for public hearing, they give the public 12 days, 5 days notice. So we can give you 5 days notice. So if you want to be involved in a public hearing, if you want to testify from your kitchen table, if you want to just draft testimony, any of those things can work. And we can help you through that process. Your input is invaluable, and we would encourage you to ask questions. And if you don't have all the answers when you're writing your testimony, yes, do ask questions. But if you have questions when you're going through if you want to go through the process, please, please, please let us know. We'd be happy to have you involved in the process. I think I'm really gonna.
Date for Day on the Hill?
It is March 11th. We would love to have you come. I always say the legislative breakfasts are done in your backyard. We break up the state in 9 areas. And then in March, we go to their backyard, the legislature's backyard, or to the front yard, or to the Capitol, whatever you want to call it. And we encourage you to come and be a part of that process. We will inform you as to what the latest is on some bills. And then we set you loose to lobby your legislators. And that's the part that seems to be difficult for a lot of people. And that's why we do the damn thing. So we want to make sure you get to do the lobbying. So please come and please be involved. And thank you.
And it's a great idea. If you've done this before, encourage another board member from your district to come with you. And if you haven't done it before, maybe there's someone else on your board that has, or ask us and we can help facilitate, reaching out to your legislator. And how do you do that? And what should your expectations be about having a meeting with your legislator in the legislative office building?
We know it's a commitment of your time. If, many of you are gainfully employed. It does mean taking off at the morning. And we don't know if they're going to be in session that day or not. If they're in session, it's sometimes better. If they're in public hearings, either way, it's good if we know they're going to be around. So, yeah.
So let's open it up to you for questions, discussion about the legislative session, legislative issues, or anything else that's on your mind.
As you're putting your budgets together, what are
Carol.
you thinking about special ed? Oh, there, I'm sorry, yeah.
Carol, go ahead.
Well, regarding the Day on the Hill, when I've gotten information about it in the past, it says, make appointments with your legislators.
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, in Montville, we're blessed. We have 5 of them. However, when I've done other lobbying, I've never tried to make an actual appointment. And when I look at the information I get, I'm not sure even what time frame within which I might be trying to make an appointment. So knowing, because it seems like there's some other stuff that goes on ahead of time.
Yeah, so we inform you about the latest of the bills. We have a couple of legislators come. We're going to try to limit that a little bit this year so that we don't have to hear from all 4 and they just say it's a love fest. They all get along. They're all working on bills. We want to give you some information. So we'll do that. We'll have a couple of them come and then we set you loose. So timing wise, we typically begin 8:30 or 9. I think it's more towards 9 because we want to get you in and parked in Hartford. So if we begin at 9, I would say if you could make an appointment at 11 o'clock at the latest, that would be, you could start a little earlier than that. But 11 o'clock would be reasonable. Even 10:45 would be reasonable.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Lynette,
So this is not about the legislative breakfast,
that's
but I was
fine.
wondering if any of the board chairs do like mid-year progress reports for superintendents. And if so, like what's the format? Who are you asking? Are you talking to central office staff or principals? Someone could just let me know if you're doing that. I'd love some ideas.
Okay, thoughts about mid-year feedback to the superintendent? Laurel.
Sure. We do a mid-year evaluation of our superintendent, but it's very informal. We don't, there's no official write-up about it. It's a conversation in executive session. Generally, we start with our goals for the year, and ask our superintendent to kind of report on how he thinks things are going, where there's room for improvement, what the focus will be for the second half of the year. And we offer feedback and requests. And it's a conversation. It's a conversation. I will say there is no formal write-up. It's a lot less formal than the official evaluation that happens over the summer.
Thanks. Eric.
Hi, Eric Bauman from East Lyme. So we maybe do it a little differently is we take our Board of Ed goals, which we have specific outcome metrics under each of those goals. And we 3 times a year, so once November, once March, and then at final end of the year, we do a review in public of how are we doing against those goals. And if you think about our goals kind of cascade to our superintendent's goals and then so on throughout. So it kind of gives a broad overview of how things are going, but we don't do a specific mid-year review on our superintendent. So we do take a look, but not exactly that way.
Thanks. Carol.
Yeah, in Montville, we do a mid-year review. We do it in executive session. It's very informal. And we don't seek outside input other than members of the board. So that's what we've been doing. And I'm listening to other people and saying, we could do this, we could do that. So this is really great discussion.
Thanks, Carol. Anyone else want to share on that topic? Jen, and then Seth.
So monthly, our superintendent has either through his own information or through a major department head or administrator reports on the status of a goal. And all of our status reports from staff in our meetings, if they align to one of the superintendent's goals or the board goals, it'll say that in the agenda item. So it's really clear which one it relates to. So we have sort of a regular cadence of different things being reported, and it happens on a monthly basis. We've been instructed that it gets a little dicey if you go to staff for superintendent evaluation input, that there can be some contract confusion, and that can send a message to your superintendent that things are not good when you do that sort of skip level. Though in private industry, that's very common. I've seen that in the education or public sector, that's often can be misinterpreted. So you want to be kind of careful how you do that so that it doesn't send the wrong message to your superintendent.
Thanks for that, Jen. And that is an important point because the evaluation process is mutually agreed upon by the board and the superintendent. So if that process were to include reaching out to other members of the staff or community, that would need to be included in that mutually agreed upon process. Seth and then Jill.
Yeah, so I was actually going to say the same thing, Jen. I think, well, we do not do a mid-year review, but I would hold that open to potentially do a mid-year review if at any point we felt like there might be some slippage in our superintendent's performance, because I think we would owe the superintendent the opportunity to have a discussion, to express what our concerns are, and have him or her have the ability to rectify, before the final year-end evaluation. So it might also be seen kind of as, remember when we were kids, like you get a progress report if you're not doing well in a class. You might, if you decide to call the superintendent in during executive session to discuss, it's an opportunity to really help adjust, give them feedback to help them adjust their performance, is the way I look at it. But otherwise, we don't see a need to do that. Our superintendent is proactive in terms of when we agree to the goals for the year at the end of each year during the evaluation period. Our superintendent just tends to report whenever there's something that they're doing that aligns with the goals. So we do get updates in that way, and any smart superintendent would probably do that. But I would strongly advise against going to staff. Um, it's just sometimes and we get requests for this all the time, like from some board members who are like, well, we should do a survey of the teachers on this or that issue. And like, look, on the one hand, you want feedback, and sometimes you can find a valuable way to get feedback, but you have to temper that against the fact that it's usually the squeaky wheels and the people who have an axe to grind who speak up, and that can skew any feedback you're trying to get. So you really have to kind of have a great relationship with your superintendent and let them do their job and evaluate them based on what you're getting openly, publicly between you and the superintendent throughout the course of the year. And you can tell if things aren't getting done. If you're paying attention, then you should be able to tell as a board when things aren't getting done without resort to surveys, without, asking a principal, well, what do you think of the superintendent or something like that? That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Seth. Jill.
Hi. So in Putnam, and I agree with a lot of what's been said. Thank you for that. In Putnam, I was the chair before. I took a time off. I'm back as a chair again. So I've seen a couple different evaluation processes. We recently have started adding in the mid-year check as more of that informal conversation. It isn't going out with surveys. It's not asking, but it has been a nice executive session discussion. We're really fortunate. We work really well with the superintendent, and it has been a nice conversation that helps refocus our board goals as well. It's interesting, Seth, what you were saying about surveys. We recently, in the past few years, adopted a new evaluation tool for the end of the year. I think it came from the Woodstock School, shared it with us, where it did include surveys just of the administrators, and our superintendent was on board with it. It was just part of the conversation. So it's something to think about how that is there, but it hasn't impeded our conversations. It's been really helpful at this point, and at least the way that we've been talking about it, it hasn't gotten in the way. It's been useful discussion for all of us, and so far it's working well, but I will think about it now moving forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Jill. Lynette.
Just real quick
Oh,
to
sorry,
respond to
Seth.
that, just real quick, a response to that to Jill. When things are going well, people are going to report well. The superintendent's going to be open to it. But then the moment that, like, what you're going to find is you're going to get a less glowing response from the principal who needed some counseling this year, or from a teacher who was disciplined in some fashion. So, and that can erode over time if the reports aren't expected to get, like right now, our administrative team is working beautifully and all in one direction, and it's all going well. And I would imagine if we were to poll the administrators, we would get like glowing reports of the superintendent. But if that were to change, and so we don't, and we know that, like, we don't need to poll them to ask that. But if that were to change, it would probably be because there was maybe an assistant superintendent who had to be counseled. I'm sorry, an assistant principal who had to be counseled or something like that. And, then suddenly the luster is off of it, and the superintendent might be less willing to subject themselves to a survey of that nature.
Thanks, Seth. Lynette.
And thank you everyone for the feedback. This is excellent. I'm definitely going to take this back to the board. My only comment now would be just to be clear that we don't have any issues with our superintendent. She's new, she's great. She's been getting all the work done that we need her to do, that we know of, right? So we only know what she tells us. And I feel like this board has been burned in the past because we thought the superintendent was doing certain things, and then it's not until after people are gone that you find out that certain things weren't being done or being handled the way that the board thought they should be handled. And I feel like if we don't ask these questions now, or get feedback now, it'll be a missed opportunity to just get ahead of things. So I think that's where we're coming from as far as wanting to do something like this, because it hasn't been done before. This is even the first time our board has had a self-evaluation, and that, we're pretty proud of that. But just as far as making sure things go well with a superintendent going forward, just wanted to make sure that I had all the different ideas and paths forward. So thank you all.
Thanks, Lynette. Jen.
So if you kind of want to get a feel for how the folks in your buildings feel about the superintendent and the district, ask for a report on the climate surveys that are required to be done on a regular cadence. There's a lot of good sort of sense of the culture, how do people feel about the organization, that can come out of that data. It's not specific, onesie twosie information. You can see kind of a trend in a building or a trend in the district when you look at the overall summary data. And that can tell you whether you need to start asking your superintendent more specific questions. With a new superintendent, looking at that climate data is really valuable because it'll show you how the culture is adjusting to the shift in leadership too.
That's great advice, Jenna. And I particularly like the idea of that leading you to, do you need to ask some specific questions of the superintendent rather than conducting a survey of staff? Seth.
Yeah, Lynette, I would respond. I recognize that, especially in a larger district, and I know Bloomfield is a lot larger than Madison. Um, there are more schools, there are more administrators, there are more teachers, there are more students, there are more places um, for less than stellar performance to show up. And I recognize that. The only advice I would give you then is make sure to approach the new superintendent, explain the background. Like, look, we've been burnt as a board. Our voters expect us to be on top of these things. So we want to come to you. What's the best way we can support you through an evaluation process that includes some kind of mid-year input, so that we can just, make sure we're on top of things as a board, and also ensure that we can best support you, so that you have a better chance of getting a great grade at the end of the year. Maybe that's a good approach, and involve them in the process.
Yeah. Great advice, and Lynette appreciates that. You got a thumbs up. All right, other topics.
Can we talk about legislation for a minute?
Sure, we'll talk about that, and then after we do that, I'll go to Jill.
Okay. So First of all, I want to say I am thrilled to see a bunch of new faces here. I missed the last meeting, so maybe it was this well attended last time. To those of you who are newly serving as chairs, welcome, congratulations, and please keep up with this forum, and also the listserv by email is very helpful. If you just have a quick question you want to shoot around. But one thing that especially with so many new faces as chairs, who seem to be involved at this time, I would like to really make a pitch for embracing our advocacy efforts through CABE, because as Patrice likes to say all the time, we're over 1,400 members strong. We're the largest kind of public group of leaders in the state. And we should have a stronger voice in Hartford than we've been able to manage to have to date. And I ascribe that to the fact that I understand that board chairs are busy. We have all these other responsibilities. Maybe we need to generate more excitement, involve more than just the board chair, maybe assign someone on your board who you can trust, who's a hard worker, who can get along with people well, who's articulate, right? Who can articulate the positions of CABE and of your particular district. And make sure to, like Sheila said, it's important to develop your own relationships, your interpersonal relationships with your team of legislators, reps and senators, because it will help you to articulate not only for your own board and district, but also for CABE. And lastly, I would say I think CABE should be finding a way to make this more exciting and more fun, and less of a drudgery, or less of a, well, now we have to contact our legislators again. It's that time of year. Like I would be looking forward to a groundswell of support for making this a more exciting, engaging proposition, because honestly, it's intimidating to go and testify in the legislature, maybe the first time you do it, but honestly, it becomes fun, and it becomes like an interesting and fun thing to do once you get over that intimidation factor. So once you break that seal, I think we can get a lot more people involved and have a lot more consistent presence pushing in Hartford, and then I think we'll get what we really need for our districts.
We're all in favor of fun at the legislature. Absolutely. I mean, I think that my getting to use a bullhorn a day on the Hill, that's about as fun as it gets in my line of work. But I hear what you're saying, Seth. And one of the things that we saw in the last legislative session is, if two board members buddy up and say, you know what, I'm going to go up to the Capitol. This was a scenario where I'm going to go up to the Capitol at 10 o'clock at night because the hearing is still going on and I'm really late on the list. But if I go up there, they'll take me right away. I'll pick you up, fellow board member, on my way. We'll let Sheila know we're coming because she's monitoring the session from her home, but she'll drive back to the Capitol and meet us there. All of this is a true story. And it was some of your peers that did that. And they will tell that story as that was really fun. And one of those board members said 2 years earlier, she could never have imagined herself doing that. Putting aside the 10 o'clock at night piece, the notion that she would go and testify at the legislature was not on what her expectations were. So we'll work on trying to make it fun. Party hats. Lisa, do we have a budget for party hats?
I'm sure that we can come up with something.
Okay, I see
Fun and
Tiffany
easy.
seems on board. She's laughing. And
Fun
Foster is
and
on board.
easy.
I can see Foster and Tiffany in party hats.
I would say fun and easy. It also has to be a
Yes.
bit easier for us to manage.
Yeah, and that's where maybe, apart from the fact that, Nick's got a mentoring program for board chairs for your daily existence, shall we say. I'm happy to match you with, somebody that's done this before. Maybe Seth would do it with somebody. Maybe, we can do that type of work too.
Jill, I think Jill and then Laurel.
So my question kind of builds upon that in the sense of we are building budgets now. We're looking at health insurance and excess costs, all the things that we are struggling with. And we're fortunate in Putnam. We have a state rep on our board. We have good connections. But I think that proving to the town that we're doing our due diligence with the state, we're going through. I've never testified. I'd love to learn more about what that is. It's incredibly intimidating, and thinking that I don't necessarily have the knowledge base. Like even for today, I printed out information so I could have it handy. I think that the testifying and contacting the legislator is part of it. But what other steps as a board chair and as a board should we be taking really to mobilize so that way we're letting taxpayers know what work we've been doing? We're getting support within our towns as well, because I know it's going to be a tough budget year because we're asking for a lot of money again, I think we will be.
So I'll offer one sentence in terms of linking it to legislative, but that's what you're talking about. But I would say have your legislators come to your board meeting. If you are struggling to show how this mandated program is now a part of your budget and you only got this much money for it, or by the way, you got no money for it, you want to let the town people know we have this new mandate on reading, or, well, I'm sorry, maybe shouldn't have mentioned that to Seth, that, it's an expense that's been added to your budget and, you need to make room for it. During COVID, you may have put in school counselors. You may now be saying, oh, geez, we really value them and we did get some funding. Now we don't have the funding anymore from the federal government. And so we know this is a value. The town people must know it's a value, but tell them it's a value. And we're going to build this into our budget, and we're going to build it in this way. It may mean that yes, your taxes are going up, but we value this service.
So we're going to go to Laurel and then Jen, but I would also add another thing that you could do is, as a board at a public meeting, adopt a resolution calling on your legislators to support additional funds for special ed excess cost, or to delay the mandate for electric bus implementation.
Yeah.
Pick an issue that you're pretty sure you've got a win on your board. That's not I know many issues are divisive, so try to pick one where you're going to get everyone that says, yes, we need to send this message. And even if you know that your legislators are already inclined to be supportive, this gives you public exposure. Your municipal officials see that you've done this, and it reinforces your legislators who are already supportive of you, but now they can say, well, listen, colleagues at the Capitol, but my board has passed a resolution saying that we need to do this. Does that help? All right, Laurel and then Jen.
Patrice, thanks for mentioning that. That's something that we have not considered passing a resolution. But what I was going to share is that I think this is the third year in a row that the Portland Board of Ed has drafted a letter to send to our legislators that highlights what we would encourage them to support during the legislative session. And I'm offering that just as a way to sort of, if you're a board that hasn't done any advocacy work, to kind of dip your toe in the water, because it's an easy thing to do. I think in each of our letters, we've tried, because our two legislators don't serve on the education committee and aren't particularly involved in or aware of necessarily aware of our specific struggles or legislative priorities. We try and remind them and spell out the issues with the education cost formula staying flat, the baseline staying flat. We try and talk about fully how important it is to fully fund excess costs and give specific examples of how that's impacted us over the last couple of years. But then we also come up with like an issue or two that are sort of very specifically relevant to Portland. This year it was a couple of very small labor issues that came up during our negotiations, our contract negotiations, that are actually having a somewhat significant impact on us as a district. And so we were able to highlight those in our letter that we're sending off to legislators. And again, as Patrice said, we pick things that are sort of easy for the full board to support. The whole board signs it. We're going to send that off to our legislators. I think this year we also intend to send it to the leadership on the education committee because they said our legislators don't serve on that committee. But it's as you're kind of building up interest in advocacy or working towards having the courage to go testify either online or in person, that's I think an easy win for your board. And to your point, Jill, gives us an opportunity to talk about those things publicly and be able to kind of share with our community, especially in the lead up to budget season, just how much these things have an impact on our budget and that we are interested in appealing to the state for more support. So, and are doing that work. So I think to us, the letter is really helpful as a tool to share that information with our community. But I love the idea that Patrice raised of formally passing a resolution. So I'm going to think about that as well.
And it doesn't have to be an elaborate legalistic resolution. It can be brief and straightforward and still get you that public attention that is part of this. Jen and then Lisa.
So in Coventry, we also periodically will vote to send a letter to our representatives, and we find that that's been kind of helpful. We authorize the superintendent to draft it so that it sounds better than when we do it. Instead of inviting our legislators to a board meeting, which we found there's a lot of reasons why the invitation is declined, the superintendent and I meet with the legislators during separately and at the admin office, and we find we can have some really good informal discussions with them where they can feel freer to ask questions about things they're not knowledgeable about. And then that helps build that relationship. And we do that once or twice a year. In addition, we have board members that related to budget stuff. We have board members that go to PTO meetings to kind of hear what the community is thinking about. I know some towns have an identified person that goes to the different PTO meetings. We do it kind of more on availability. What we find is if we do that, then we start to get questions from those same folks during the budget season, and it opens up that informal dialogue about what we're asking for, what we need, and getting that feedback to get our on-the-ground advocates helping through the process. We also provide copies of our budget materials to our town council, which is our fiduciary, the folks that give us our appropriation. We try to provide them information early in the process, so they get electronic copy of our superintendent's budget request. And then we meet with them before they make the determination on what appropriation to give us so that they have the chance to ask questions and not have to go through the email back and forth for that information. Sometimes that's a pretty stressful meeting and feels like an inquisition. Other times it's more collaborative, kind of depends on who's sitting on each side of the table. But it is a way to kind of start talking about those budget related things before you get to your final referendum where there isn't as much flexibility.
Thanks, Jen. Lisa.
I think, Jill, I'm going to go back to the beginning part of your question, which I believe, if I remember, had to do with the community wondering if you've left any stones unturned kind of thing. And what I would suggest would be really focus on telling your story at the board table, whether it be at budget hearings, budget workshops, that sort of thing, whether it's the superintendent, the school business official, yourself, talking about, well, here are the things we've looked at, here are the things that we've done. So really taking the initiative to share your story and what you have done. In sharing that, I think that will support the efforts that you're all putting into putting together a reasonable budget that will support the work being done in your district. It also may, similar to what Jen mentioned about board members being at PTO meetings, it may prompt people to ask questions, have you thought of, or that sort of thing. But really, the thing that I mentioned to boards so often is tell your story. You take control of the story and share that with folks, and that will help. And I'm happy to chat with you, Jill, offline, or anybody else about that sort of thing.
Thank you, Lisa. Lee.
And another thing we do to support telling this story, and I know everybody does this, we will ask questions that we full well know the answers to. So in our budget, we always do a chart that shows enrollment to staffing. And one of the places where we have a really divergent line is one of our middle schools where we've kept full teaming models, and the enrollment really doesn't support that number of teachers. So at our budget meeting, at our day-long budget meetings, we always ask questions, and the community asks questions, and Board of Finance asks questions that then over the month of January, we have our administrators answer. So one of the questions we'll have them answer this year, even though we know it and the PTA knows it, why are we so committed to the middle school teaming model? What else have you looked at? Could you make make one of the grades humanities and science math and not have a 4-person team? So that gives them the opportunity to explain why we're committed to it. And frankly, the town, the opportunity to say, maybe that's better, but we don't want to pay for that anymore. And we're also asking, like, how many buses could we reduce? Well, the answer to that is going to be, how long do we think it's okay for an elementary kid to be on the bus? Westport, what do you think? Are you okay with kids being on the bus 45 minutes? If you are, we can cut 2 buses. That's $250,000. Like, it's not astrophysics. You just have to tell people what they're paying for. And then, do our values demand that? Or do we think, okay, not good, but good enough?
That's great. And also good advice is to let your administration know that you're going to ask those questions so that they know that this is not a gotcha. This is a communication tool that you're using in a very deliberate way. All right. And on any other topic that someone wants to raise?
This is Robin Nelson. I do have a question. I'm a new chair for Darien. I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand. I'm trying to figure out how to use it.
No problem. Jump in.
Sorry. Hold on. I'm going to start my video. So I have a question because I think someone mentioned talking more informally with, whether that's kind of Board of Selectmen, elected town officials, or, RTM. In Darien, we have the RTM chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, or we have the chair of the Education Committee, and all of their committee members. In the past, we've asked them to kind of submit questions during the budget process, kind of on a written basis, or they can do that during public comment. But what would you advise or is it possible to have more of an informal meeting, for instance, like with the superintendent and board chair, with, for instance, the chair of the Education Committee or the chair of the Finance and Budget Committee, to allow for a little bit more of an informal dialogue, as opposed to having everything have to be in public or submitted publicly as questions?
So I'll give you, as the attorney, one of the attorneys on the call, Seth, you can opine as well, and anyone else who I'm not aware of that's an attorney, as long as this is not a quorum or a quorum of a committee of the board. So if it's you as board chair, the superintendent, and the chair of the town finance committee, that's perfectly fine. And I suspect that some of you may do that, but can I see nods at least of those? So Lee and Laurel, Seth, all have that informal discussion. So that's perfectly appropriate. And that again is a way to give a heads up and some of the background of, okay, this is why we're including these things in the budget. Or these are the things that we've been able to reduce some costs. It's also part of sharing that part of the story.
We've actually formalized it a little bit in Madison. We have periodic tri-chair meetings where the chair of the three major boards meet, and it's very helpful toward supporting the education budget.
And who do they meet with? The chair and the superintendent, or who?
We have the chair of the Board of Selectmen, the chair of the Board of Finance, the chair of the Board of Ed. We have our finance director, which is shared between the district and the town, so that's helpful. And we have our superintendent. That's usually who's on the calls.
We do that, or I have a monthly chair, superintendent, and first select. We meet, but when we have an issue like this year and every year, our issue is healthcare. We make working groups, which will be 2 members of Board of Finance, 2 members of Board of Ed, or up to 3, depending on, not having half. RTM, which is our final legislative appropriations council. Yeah. So, and then we'll work together over time. We'll meet however much it takes to sort of go through a multi-year decision-making process for healthcare, for example. Or we did it with transportation. I think we might have done it back when we changed school start times. And it's not a secret, but they're not public.
Okay, yeah, we did do that to evaluate some transportation and start times, but just during the budget process specifically, that's helpful to understand, because it can create a better working relationship and to have that kind of opportunity for more informal dialogue.
And Jessica points out that she can't raise her hand, but they also have a tri-chair meeting before they publicly present the budget. It's the full Board of Ed, full Board of Selectmen, and full Board of Finance, the superintendent and the finance director. I would just opine that since it is the full board, hopefully that's being posted as a public meeting.
It is. It is.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. And Jessica, what town are you from? I'm sorry.
I am from Thompson.
Okay, thanks very much. So I see, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Kiara, and then I'll go to Laurel.
Thank you.
There you are.
Hi, sorry about that. I'm Kira Thompson. I am the East Haddam Board of Ed chair. I was elected chair in November. This is my 5th year on the East Haddam Board of Education. I'm going to switch topics if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm wondering if anybody has information about the electric bus situation. I've tried to do my own research and I feel a little lost. We are going out to bid for the first time in 10 years, and part of our RFP will be, sort of the bus company has to figure out in 2030. But for us, and I saw some other big districts, and well, we're not a big district. We are the 4th largest town land-wise in Connecticut, but we are a very small school district. So to me, it doesn't make any sense, because if we have to finance it, there's no way we can afford it. But I was wondering if anybody could have any insight for me about the electric bus situation. Thank you.
Let me just add before you get to that. The legislature passed a law mandating that you change to EV buses. The date for 2030 is for those communities that are in environmental distressed communities.
Which seems to be many rural communities, which.
Yeah, and the rest of you are.
We are on that list for some reason.
Right, yeah, right. So I just want, those of you that's not on your radar, it may be because you're 2040, so.
So we do have, and I haven't been able to look at it yet, our president, Meg Scatto, attended a virtual meeting dealing with electric buses. I'm going to look at that information and we can share that out. Does anyone on this call have experience with going out to bid yet, or I know there is some information circulating about cost of new EV buses. And we also know that there's the infrastructure issue in terms of charging stations. Laurel, you look like you're ready.
So, sort of. I mean, what I can share with you is that we're in a similar boat where Portland is on that list too for some reason. And we are in the middle of contract negotiations with our current bus service provider. And what I can tell you, Kira, is that the CEO is he thinks this is going to get pushed off. He's like, this is not actually going to be an issue that impacts us for 2030. It is very likely that they're going to push this off to 2040, 2035, 2040. So from our perspective, because there's significant cost, not only, I mean, we could not manage the cost if we had to handle upgrade of a fleet to electric bus, but also the infrastructure costs of putting in charging stations. Like it just would be absolutely devastating to our budget. We're a very small town. So we worked with our lawyer in drafting contract language that kind of gets us an out from the contract, essentially, if, because this current contract would take us past 2030. So that we've included some language in there. And I would just encourage you to talk to an attorney as you do end up drafting contract language to make sure that you've got something that allows you to have an out if they're not positioned to provide you with that. If this were to go through for 2030 and you were in a contract with a provider that doesn't have an electric fleet, that you would have an out to figure out a different plan. And that was what the attorney advised us to do. So we took his advice.
But this is a perfect circling back to how we began in terms of advocacy. This is an issue that we are hearing about all over the state. Whether it impacts you in 2030 or 2040, it will impact you. And while there certainly are, including among board members, advocates for this is something we need to do for the environment, the reality, the fiscal reality, and the infrastructure reality are what needs to be communicated to legislators. So I would encourage all of you to relay that message, because there are legislators who are saying, oh, absolutely, we're going to push it off. And then there are legislators in key positions who are saying, no, we got this passed, and this is important for the environment, and we're going to keep it at 2030.
Yeah, the House chair of the Environment Committee, we're being told, is pushing back.
So hearing from you, and in the context, what I would encourage you to do is frame your messaging around, we understand the importance. We're not going to have a debate about, is this important for the environment or not? That's not what you're charged with doing. You're charged with saying, this is not possible within our budget and within our infrastructure to do it by 2030. How does that sound?
Certainly appreciate it. Yes, our contract is going to be like that. Our RFP was posed as like, if you can't do it by 2030 and it has to be done, we can get out of the contract. It's just, trust me, I'm all for the environment. It's just for us fiscally, there is no way we could invest in the infrastructure. We could hardly finance our schools as is. Of a charging stations, and if we had to buy an electric fleet of buses. And not only that, and you're right, I definitely thank you for I will have to advocate. The weight of an electric vehicle is much different. It's very heavy with those batteries, so it would be very detrimental to our. We're rural, and I think there's other rural districts on there. We have some wooden bridges, dirt roads. It wouldn't bode well.
We're also being told that there is not a sufficient amount of industry professionals that can train your districts in how to care for an electric vehicle, battery operated,
the maintenance issues.
Problem.
All right, with that, it is 12 o'clock.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just ask, Sheila, is that still John Michael Parker?
I believe he's the House Environment Chair.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yes,
he used to be on the Education Committee. He's my representative, and I'm very close with him. I can talk to him about the practical implications. Like, hey, a lot of the board chairs are totally in favor of the environment and whatever, but here's a practical limitation that we're all facing. And, we're fine with the pro-environmental aspect, but you've got to find money from the legislature to pay for charging stations and also to fund the conversion.
Seth, is he going to be at the legislative breakfast
Yes,
next
he
week
is.
or 2 weeks from now? That's
Yes,
great.
he is.
Can we plan to talk about it then, please? Because boy, oh boy, these vehicles, I'm being told they're like $700,000 a piece. If we end up having to take on the costs of our bus contract provider having to upgrade vehicles, like we can't. It's gonna swamp us.
Yeah, and I'll also talk to the school bus transportation lobbyist as well in terms of what they're hearing, because that's a whole industry that can make a big statement too.
And they're going to be passing along the cost to us in terms of
Oh, absolutely.
So, because, if they have to convert their whole fleet, it's going to be expensive for them.
All right, we're going to bring this to a close. On behalf of the CABE Board of Directors and staff, we wish you well in your role as board chairs, and please be in touch between meetings, and we can support you in any way possible. Have a great afternoon.
Goodbye, and thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Take care,
Thank you.
Foster.
Bye.
All right, on to the next.